What's happening, everybody? Welcome to this instant reaction pod. Trebor Pena, Syracuse wide receiver, and to be named captain of the 2025 Syracuse Football Orange, leading receiver from a year ago, is in the transfer portal. You got Brent and you got Chris Carlson here to react to that and how this will impact Syracuse football going forward as the transfer portal is set to open in football starting on Wednesday, April 16th, or we're doing this live pod on Tuesday, April 15th. So that is happening. And Chris, it's hard, I think, in the portal era, in the modern day of college sports, to be shocked by something, right? Especially with all this money flowing around, players coming and going, the transactions, the loose standards that are out there for this stuff. But this one comes pretty darn close. That Trebor Pena, according to reports out there from 247 Sports, CBS Sports, is going to be in the transfer portal when it opens tomorrow. There's already a couple of schools that are hot on his trail that we'll get to here. But I would say that this is about as close to stunning as it gets, even in the era we live in today.
Yeah. I think it certainly wasn't on my radar for a couple of reasons, right? He was named a captain. Syracuse had him in the non-contact uniform all spring. Like he had one good year at Syracuse, really. It came under Fran. He was poised to be the centerpiece of this offense next year. So for all those reasons, like, this wasn't on my radar. There are a couple of reasons why it should have been, maybe, right? And this is where we all need to change our thinking. He had one more season to cash in on his college football days. And we are going through a particularly turbulent time in the transfer portal era where there's this NCAA versus House settlement looming. They are trying to put some restrictions on the amount of outside income that athletes can be paid by collectives and boosters. So for some schools, this is like, the mad rush where there are no more rules. And I'm skeptical that the rules they're putting in are going to work, but this is like the last off season where we know there are no rules. So if you are a player who wants to capitalize financially, This was the time. And Syracuse, we've talked about the tough schedule. Syracuse is going to have a new quarterback next year. So if you are somebody who really wanted to, this was your shot. This was your shot at life-changing money, which maybe it is for Trebor. We don't know the financial details yet. We're certainly trying to figure them out. Like, this was the time. So, maybe we need to change our thinking, and maybe it should have been on our radar, but it certainly wasn't.
It's fascinating, Chris, because I think you and I, for the most part, are in favor of the player empowerment era for so long. This has been tilted the other way. Get your bag, get your money, do what's best for you. But it's always interesting when it arrives right on your front porch, right? And we're going to get some Syracuse Sports Insider reaction to. Syracuse football fans are just stunned by this news today, but we brought it up. Look, there, ironically enough, by the way, at an NIL event in the fall, Fran Brown anoints Trebor Pena a captain for next year. He's going through some players he went from Arondé Gadsden, who we all knew was going to go to the National Football League. And the stunning news there would have been had he come back, right? So goes to Arondé, but then he gets to Trebor and he says, oh, here's Trebor Pena. He's a junior. He's going to be a captain next year. I tweeted some video of that via our friend Sam Croston from that event that's out there, right? He was the leading receiver. I'm going to go through the numbers here, Chris. Last year, 84 catches, 941 yards, 9 touchdowns. He was Kyle McCord's safety valve, right? Mm-hmm. And while this team is deep at receiver, and we'll go through some of the names here, there is not another Trebor Pena on this roster. He is a unique talent. He is a slot receiver, like I said, the best term I can come up with here is the safety valve. He's the guy that all else fails, Trebor's going to be open. Yards after the catch, the speed, the size. He is such a unique weapon. He reminds me a lot, as a Buffalo Bills fan, of Khalil Shakir and what he brings to that offense, right? And at the end of the day, if Josh Allen needs to get bailed out, Shakir is always there to move the sticks. That is Trebor Pena. He is the heart and soul of that passing game. and now he is gone. So now Syracuse is in a position where maybe they're going to be looking in the portal at a position they didn't think they would need to, given how deep they are at receiver. This is a Syracuse team that needs a cornerback or two, and they hosted a big one out of Fresno State. Julian Neal, who's defensive coordinator Kevin Coyle at Fresno State last year, is now on the Syracuse staff. Syracuse hosted a quarterback, Zach Gibson, yesterday, who played at Georgia State last year and also played at Georgia Tech and Akron in his time, right? Just the usual process here of the portal. But wide receiver was not a position of need, and now it becomes one. But Chris, this seems to be pointing to an NIL story, and you brought it up about everything that they're trying to dot the I's and cross the T's on. We're already hearing today and there's some guys that do a terrific job covering the portal. Chris Hummer from CBS Sports, Matt Zenitz from CBS Sports, to already hear that Miami may be targeting Trebor Pena. There's a Big 12 school in the mix for Trebor Pena. Like, this is tampering. This is just plain and simple tampering to know that these are the schools that are doing it. And you're already linking to when the portal opens tomorrow. Because remember, it's open from April 16th to April 25th. That is a short window, and an even shorter window, as you said, to get all this lined up before all the parameters come in here. So to know we already see schools that are lining up, and it's not just, oh, he makes sense here. No, there's a link, and there is there's some sort of connection there that is happening. It just goes to show you, as much as we know this is all the shady business that's up front in college football, it still does not make you feel good that this is the way it's going down.
You know, the tampering claim is interesting because, you know, if it is a school cannot talk to Trebor, right? A school cannot be talking directly to Trebor, but a school can talk to Trebor's agent.
That's
just
right.
Like a school can talk to a coach's agent when a coach is still coaching, and the coach can know exactly where he's going to go the next season when the year ends. So it is right. It is business as usual for people in college sports. It's just players can now participate in that business, and there are a lot more players, and we tend to care about them a lot more. And it's a shock to the system that it's now happening with them. But like, the tampering claim is interesting because it is just like, it's how college sports have operated for years.
It's just, you make a good point. It's just players now. And because of the element of agents, right? You technically, and we don't know this for sure, but one would think that Trebor Pena is not on the phone with Mario Cristobal, right? And of course, it's the agents that are doing this. And to be fair to them, I just brought it up. That window is short. So that's the agent's job. Just like we talked yesterday after practice with Tommy Caparelli, who's the general manager for Syracuse football. Alex Klein has the same responsibility for basketball. You're talking to all these people, the agents and everybody you can talk to. So when the portal opens, you strike. You have identified who you want. Here's our offer. Here's what we can pay you. Here's your playing time. Here's everything. And you get your guy. So I understand that. But Trebor is just such a surprise because he just seemed all in. I've talked with his family a few times. It felt like he belonged here and wanted to be here and set to be a captain, right? Like, there's just certain names that even in this era, when I started to hear this morning, I was like, wow, it's a short list of players that would stun me that you would think would do this. And Trebor was on that list. And again, I don't begrudge him. If he's going to get a better offer from Miami and you got to do what's best for you, I completely understand that. But it's so hard, Chris, because college football is the second most popular sport in this country. There's no question about that, behind the National Football League, right? But it's almost death by 1,000 cuts. And the sport is kind of eating itself from the inside when this continually happens. Even the most passionate college football fans have to be stepping back a minute here saying, man, what is this sport doing to itself here? It's fascinating to cover. It's a soap opera dynamic that's playing out here, but what is this sport doing to itself? And it is, in the blink of 2 or 3 years, no longer, in some ways, but still in others, not the sport that I think a lot of people fell in love with, right? And it's not just football. You can apply that to other things. I think we all kind of get that. And we understand the business transactions we're in. And this is like a lot of things in life, Chris. When it arrives on your front door and it involves certain people, it just hits you in the stomach a little harder. And you're trying to process it as best as you can. Now, I want to bring our listeners and viewers into a scene that we witnessed last night. So Chris, Javon, and I, Javon Edmonds, our Syracuse football beat reporter, of course, you guys have seen on the pod as well. So practice is over around 6:15-ish. We talked to Tommy Carparelli, as we mentioned, the general manager. We talked to Ricky Brumfeld, special teams coach, and the scouting staff for Syracuse. So through the process of spring ball, different coaches and different personnel are available as spring practice has gone on. Last night was the last practice where we had media access and interviews until spring camp breaks. They have one more practice on Wednesday, and then spring practice is over, right? So then we talked to some players that were available after practice. But in the meantime, there's a meeting going on at midfield. This is in the Ensley Center, the indoor practice facility at Syracuse. There's a meeting. There's a huddle at midfield. And in that huddle is Fran Brown. I might leave out a name or two here, Chris, so feel free to jump in. Derek McDonald, Jack Stonehouse, Deion Wilson Jr., Deuce Chestnut. I think Mark Petrie was in there.
He was. Yep.
And yeah, I'm leading to I'm burying the lead here. Trebor Pena was in that huddle. I was not within earshot.
Appeared to be a leadership meeting.
Yes.
Right?
So we're looking at this huddle and we're like, that's like kind of a little leadership council going on here. Now, remember, this is one of the last practices of the year. And it's not uncommon for this to happen, that players talk on the field with Fran and meetings happen and that things happen after practice. By the way, Trebor Pena was one of the guys who consistently stayed after practice to work on throwing with Ricky Collins as he developed into the starting quarterback of this team. And Chris mentioned it. He was in a white jersey at the spring game, non-contact. He was in a black jersey in practice for a lot of spring camp, which meant non-contact, which I asked Trebor directly about, by the way. And it was basically veteran maintenance, right? He didn't have a serious injury. It's just, we don't want this guy to get hurt. Okay. That meeting went on for, what do you say, Chris? I lost track of time, but it was at least an hour, maybe longer.
I was going to say, it felt like an hour to me. I don't know if I'm overestimating the suffering that we went through just standing around, but it felt like an hour to me.
A lot of standing around, a lot of waiting, a lot of just meaningless conversation. No, I shouldn't say meaningless. It's good to catch up with people and talk, but you're just killing time, just waiting for this huddle to break up. Now, we were not within earshot of this thing, but there were times, Chris, I could tell it was getting pretty heated in that huddle. There was some passion going on in that huddle, which, again, Fran encourages his players, especially his leadership council, to speak up. So I don't know what the subject of that meeting was, but what I can tell you is everybody that came from it was not in a good mood when they came through the lobby. So at one point we were on the field while that meeting was happening. We eventually made our way into the lobby of the Ensley Center. So Chris, you did talk to Trebor Pena briefly, who we were told was on the way to class.
Yeah.
After this, what was that interaction like?
We were told he was late to class and given 2 minutes. So I took my 2 minutes. I was working on a Ricky Collins story. I talked mostly about Ricky, just trying to make the most of my time. But Trebor was clearly miserable, like rolled his eyes when he was asked to talk to me, like clearly did not want to be there and was unhappy to have to go through this experience. Now, I attributed it to like, he just spent an hour after practice that he probably didn't want to be there at a meeting. And then he was late for class. So who wouldn't be eager to get out of there and sort of escape at that point? Boy, looking back in hindsight, it does jump out that he was so unhappy to have to sort of go through, what Syracuse players are asked to do. And I guess I understand why. I guess I understand why it would have been such a short to sort of talk to me after the game.
So, I mean, who knows what they were talking about in that huddle, but looking back and hearing you describe that and to the passion that was in that meeting, like, look, we live in a world where the portal's open and anything can happen. So I don't want to speculate about other names or other people that could be going into it, but man, if Trebor Pena is in the portal, then anything is possible. Anything is possible when that portal opens. And remember, you don't have to wait for the portal to open to put your name in it. Like we've seen a flood of players. Jade Knott, the running back at Cal, was another eye-opener last night to put his name into the portal. And that's just the era that we live in today. So we mentioned now Syracuse may have to target a position in the portal they didn't think they would have to, Chris. And Pena is such a unique talent. There's nobody else on this roster that does what he does as kind of that slot safety valve, Khalil Shakur type receiver. But they are deep at this position overall, right? You bring back now again. We'll see what happens when the portal opens. But assuming all these guys stay, we think Daryl Gill Jr. You have Justice Ross Simmons, who has had a terrific camp. Emmanuel Ross, who's looked great in camp. Jalen Hornsby had a great spring game, 5 catches for 112 yards. Darius Johnson has stepped up at the wide receiver position. Remember, Amari Hatcher was out of camp. He was in a black at times, which meant complete no contact, eventually in a green jersey, which means just he's injured, don't hit him kind of thing. But Hatcher in the mix at wide receiver. They brought in a transfer, Tyshawn Russell, who Fran likes to call touchdown. Tyshawn Russell, who's frankly had mixed results in camp from what we've seen of him so far. So look, I might be forgetting a name or two here, so jump in on guys that I missed here. I'm just looking at the roster.
Booby Johnson was right. He's the guy that, to me, like, he's not going to be Trebor because, like, Trebor is experienced and the quarterbacks talk all the time about how smart he is. And not that Booby Johnson is not, but he's a true freshman, right? He's going to be learning the game of football and how to get open underneath. But he is the guy that you sort of maybe like in that position in terms of being a real quick guy who can break open, be an option against the blitz underneath. But he's a freshman. Like that it is going to be tough for him to get up to speed to play that same role. And the other guys are sort of more traditional receivers, right? Yeah. They're like guys that you view more as like outside threats, the more prototypical receiver versus the underneath guy. There isn't a true underneath guy with experience, on the roster. So it'll be very interesting how they replace him. I mean, Darrell Gill has incredible hands. Like, I don't think he dropped a pass last year, according to PFF. Like, he'd be the guy I would think that I would use, trying to make contested catches in space. But he's not Trebor Pena.
And of course, they've been working in Demetrius Samuel Jr. on the offensive side of the ball. He is set to be a starting cornerback with a option to go on the offensive side of the ball. He was targeted a lot in the spring game. He officially didn't make a catch, but he made a couple of nice plays. One on the sideline on a throw from Luke Carney. It was just out of bounds. He just couldn't get his feet in on that case. But now, how does he elevate up the offensive depth chart as a weapon with Trebor Pena now out of the mix, right? And again, these are the names that are still there. We're in the portal era where maybe one or two of those guys leave. They converted Teron Hale from wide receiver to safety, right? So you're still deep there. There's still some weapons, some speed, some down the field guys, some slot guys. You lose Aronde Gatson from the tight end position. And one thing we didn't see in the spring game, Chris, was the tight ends targeted a lot in the passing game, right? David Clement is a big target at 6'6". He is the starting tight end. I'd be stunned if they didn't incorporate him in the passing game in some way.
I think it's going to be Dan Villari. Right, we didn't see him in the spring.
Dan Villari, of course.
He was hurt. Like Clement was the starting quarterback for the spring, but they compared him to Max Mang, a blocking tight end. Like, I think Villari is going to be the pass catching threat at that position.
So Villari's kind of the closest thing they have to what Pena does, but he's not a slot receiver. He is a tight end. It's different, right? And look, Villari had mixed results last year. I am glad he's back on this team. He is looked at as a leader on this team. I mentioned that Trebor had been working with Ricky. Now, Dan Villari, every practice, he and Ricky Collins were often the last two walking off the field. Okay. So Villari takes on a bigger role there. And that's a good point, Chris, because Villari was in a green jersey all through camp and was in that non-contact thing, but he's certainly going to be involved in the offense. So this is a position that it stings, but it feels like it stings a lot more from the standpoint of the person, the captain, the leader, the production. You certainly don't want to lose, but I think that's the biggest shockwave that people are feeling. And we'll get some Syracuse Sports Insider reaction here in a minute, Chris, but it's like, man, Trebor, really? Like, there's certain guys you could see, like, I get it. He's not getting enough time, or maybe but
He is unique.
We're assuming this is NIL related, right?
If it is, he is in a unique position in that he is a proven producer on the team.
Yes.
Like all those guys that we mentioned, we like their potential. We saw them in flashes, but they are not the type that is going to go into the transfer portal and, drive up the bidding to a high place, right? They are guys that are more, we like them because of their potential. Like Trebor is the proven commodity. If there was a guy that was going to jump in and take advantage of this moment, it was him. Like it wasn't on my radar. I feel a little silly that maybe it wasn't, but like he was the guy that maybe had a moment, to do that. But to your point, like, right, I'm shaking my head here. I'm stuttering because like he did feel like the ultimate Syracuse guy. Spent his whole career here, was from New Jersey. Fran and Jeff Nixon sort of rejuvenated his career last year with Kyle. Like, so surprising that it would leave for sure.
So Chris, there was an NIL panel on Friday prior to the spring game hosted by Scott Hansen. Dwight Freeney was there. David Falk was there, the famous sports agent. Justin Pugh, who's on the panel of the board, I should say, of SU Football NIL, one of the main groups, along with Athletes Who Care and Orange United, that's dishing out NIL money. Trebor was at that event. And I was talking with somebody a little bit this morning who was kind of assisting Trebor in the line of work that he wants to go into in his major. And like that person was like, I can't believe this. Like I was just talking to him the other day, right? And I was at this event with him. Now, maybe he heard some things in that NIL panel that, says, well, wait a minute, what am I worth here, right? You were there on Saturday at the ribbon cutting event. Now, the new football facility, they've been in there for the past few weeks, but they had kind of a formal ribbon cutting ceremony and a tour. And Chris wrote a great story. We got some great photos of that up on syracuse.com if you haven't seen that facility, right? And in that speech, right, Kent Severud, John Wildhack, John Lally saying various things. Severud says Syracuse is looking to be a consistent top 25 presence. John Wildhack had a number of things to say. Lally wants this team to win the ACC, but NIL certainly comes up in those discussions, right? So it's a fascinating representation of how this works, Chris. Like at some point here, Trebor Pena, it becomes known, and again, we don't know this is exactly the reason, but one could put two and two together here. So I'm just operating under an assumption here, but it becomes known Trebor Pena wants X, right? Mm-hmm. What's the process? Do you have a fund that you can look into and say, well, here's how much money we have. Are we willing to pay Trebor Pena this? Do you have an emergency booster you could go to? Like get him on speed dial. Like, hey, we need X amount of money for Trebor Pena. Can you give us that money? That's either in addition to what you have already, or it's basically like, hey, sorry, I already donated to NIL and this is the deal, right? So, of course, we're assuming they went through that process here and didn't get the answer they were looking for. If it is Miami, let's say, Miami has, I would think, a bigger NIL budget than Syracuse does. Mario Cristobal, coach. Now, could this be football related? And look, I think Ricky Collins is going to end up being a good quarterback here, but Ricky Collins,
he's a first year guy.
He's a first year quarterback.
And he has 3 years to grow into the position.
Correct. And Trevor's in his last year.
Fran has said that. Yep.
And when we were at Pro Day, Chris,
I was surprised he came back, right? Like there was no better platform for him to go to the NFL than like coming off Kyle. So for much of this preseason, we were curious about like what went into Trevor's decision not to jump to the NFL.
Right. And even at Pro Day, so remember, Trebor Pena was at Pro Day as one of the receivers that Kyle was throwing to. And there were people at Pro Day. I remember Javon was talking to somebody from Kansas City who was like, hey, who's like, they were impressed by Trebor Pena. And like, not that he wouldn't be on their radar already. These guys are scouted and tracked for, a few years before they're eligible for the NFL, but they were impressed with him and talking about Trebor as a guy like, hey, somebody will have to look at. He does fit Kansas City's offense, by the way, is in the position that he plays, right? Now he gets to go with Carson Beck for a year. And there's, mixed opinions on Carson Beck, but look, Carson Beck's a more experienced quarterback than Ricky Collins is. So from that standpoint, once you get past the shock and awe of this, and you're just looking at it from, this is a guy that's a year away from going to the National Football League, wants to keep that momentum going, wants to get all the money he deserves before getting to the NFL. If you just distill this down into a static business decision, like you start to understand it. But there's just more involved in that in sports these days.
And it is also a position and a year where, like, if I'm Syracuse, I don't want to get into a bidding war. Like, I like the wide receivers I have largely. No, you can't replace Trebor, but I like them. And, like, I'm not breaking the bank this year with that schedule. Like, if my boosters have a finite amount of money, like, I am not getting into a bidding war this year of all years. And I know people don't like to hear that. And Fran wants to win every year, but, like, this is not the year to, like, blow the budget, right? That's next year or the year after that. In terms of if you're pushing all your chips in, this is not a push all your chips in type of year.
I think that's a fair point. Now, some could make the argument that you need every weapon you can to play that schedule, right? So pay the money and get them out there. But yeah, you look at it realistically in the year so I'm big booster Bob, I'll call myself here, and I get that phone call. That's kind of the conversation I'm having. I'm like, all right, look, I can give you the money for Trebor, but all things considered, would you rather I save it for player X next year when we feel like maybe a little more realistically you're going to compete for an ACC title as opposed to this year when you have one of the hardest schedules I've ever seen, right? That's a great point. I think that's a great point. All right, Chris, let's see what our Syracuse Sports Insiders had to say about this. There are moments when I send texts to the insiders and to see the flood of responses coming back, it is always intriguing to see that snowball rolling down the hill. And here's a little bit of what they had to say about this. Matt P says he is Maliking us, in reference to Malik Brown, who upgraded, if you will, to Duke and played in the Final Four this past year and got paid more money, and Trevor's hoping for the same. Chris K says, I don't wish him ill will. I don't wish him well. He's a piece that will be replaced. See, that's the shame of it, Chris, because Trebor didn't feel like that guy, right? In a lot of ways, right? But even Trebor becomes one of those just transactional pieces. All right, well, next man up, replace him. And it just didn't feel like he was one of those guys. But now some people will look at it that way.
Now, I do applaud that line of thinking. Like, don't hold it against a person if they are reaching out for potential life-changing money, but you don't have to root for him either.
Exactly.
You can hope he loses every game. And
by the way, okay. November 8th, Syracuse at Miami. If he ends up there, right? It's the early reports are Miami is somebody in the mix here. That's not confirmed yet, but if he ends up there, I mean, that was already a juicy storyline given the
how last
year ended, right? And it's just always interesting when you play Miami, right? But throw a little more juice on that matchup. Sean M says, Brent, I'm not one to criticize the portal and what a player chooses to do, but this one hurts. Pena was a fan favorite and I thought was on his way to leaving a legacy here as a guy who has the characteristics this fan base never forgets. Now it looks like he's just another player who has a good year in a revolving door of endless names. I'm actually disappointed.
That's fair.
Frank F., who says Pena in the portal is about as brutal of a loss as you could have. From Gary, who says, I'm embarrassed that I spent years yakking about athletes deserving to be paid. The pendulum swung full bore from NCAA is evil to the Wild West. College football is ruined.
Collective bargaining will help. Have a desire for that.
This is where my frustration comes in, Chris. They could have done this. Not that they would have come out of the gate with a perfect system in place, but you have been playing catch up since July of 2021 when they essentially just turned on the fire hose. They went from getting it's rare when you see a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, but they got one. Now, remember, this was not about NIL. This was a different NCAA Supreme Court case. But I distinctly remember Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, after that ruling, basically saying, don't come back here because you will lose again if there's another ruling, which of course led to the House ruling and led to everything we're talking about here, and maybe some more guardrails being put into place. But if the NCAA, and I don't want to just point at the NCAA as the villain here, like all parties involved.
Colleges, right? College presidents,
colleges themselves, college presidents,
athletic directors, leaders at Syracuse told us for a long time they didn't want to pay athletes.
Exactly.
So they are part of this.
Who remember all those people you just said and more are the NCAA. Okay, the NCAA is a convenient villain here, but all the parties involved here had an opportunity, instead of fighting this thing and spending millions of dollars in lobbying, say to concede it's happening and to put somewhat of a system in place that, again, they wouldn't get it right the first time. You always have to make adjustments on these things. Look at the college football playoff and some of the other things out there. But surely some smart people could have gotten in a room and slowed down the chaos that college football finds itself in now. So what you're doing is you're playing catch up here. And you're going to be trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube for years until there is some firm legislation on this. And there used to be, Chris, for those that I always felt that having to wait a year as a transfer was patently unfair, given how coaches can go wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted. But you can look back on that and say, I don't know, maybe they had somewhat of an idea there that it was a deterrent for people to just go wherever they want, whenever they want. I'm still not in favor of that, by the way, but where's the middle ground here? And we're not going to solve this question on this pod. It's been a continuing discussion here, but it's just frustrating because they had a chance and now they're out there crying foul about this. It's like, no, you screwed this up and now you have to pay the piper on this. And that's where we are 4 years later after that decision and that ruling in July of 2021 to open the floodgates on this. So I just have no sympathy, but it's at the expense. And it's what Gary just said. Gary,
I have sympathy for fans. I have sympathy for the fans. I get it. I get why you're all frustrated, right?
That's where I have sympathy for, because Gary said it himself. I was for this for years. I ranted about this for years, Chris. You and I have had hundreds of conversations about this, right? But as a fan, I get it. This is death by 1,000 cuts. The more this happens, everybody's going to reach a breaking point where they're like, no, maybe not a breaking point, but it's going to drain your enthusiasm for what you think and what you fell in love with and what college sports, air quotes now, college sports is supposed to be. It's turning people off. Yet, it's the second most popular sport in the country. The ratings are not going down. They're going up. The money is not going down. It's going up. So it's an interesting conundrum we're in here.
If it makes Gary feel better, it is still better that young people are getting life-changing opportunities than not financially. I would rather see people make money that need it than not. And eventually sanity will come.
Yes.
But it will be, I get that it's an unpleasant ride for the moment.
James A says, I can't process this. Pena in the portal just doesn't make sense, other than his production may go down during the rebuilding year and heading elsewhere could help grow his draft stock. There's a couple of things that we brought up a moment ago that could be a factor in this, right?
Yep.
From Jeff A, who says, I can't figure this out at all. Probably the most devastated I have felt losing someone in the portal era. A couple more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, including from Jared. Says, it sucks for the coaches as well, because think of the amount of reps that Trebor took in the slot that a younger player could have been taking and gaining experience and snaps during spring ball. I get that. Timing is bad. I don't know if you can make up all of that in the fall and over the summer, whoever sticks around in the summer working with the quarterback situation. And now that we know that Ricky Collins is the starter, but I got to go back to what I said earlier, Chris. I don't know if that matters because there's not another Trebor Pena on this roster. I get it that you could try and identify somebody to put in that position and get them the reps and get them in the flow of it. But that's what makes losing Trebor sting a little bit, is he's a unicorn on that roster. He's such a unique player at that position. I don't know if there's anybody else that could do what he does. From Jamal, who says, shaking my head. I'm starting to get turned off with college football. I remember when I could name at least 15 to 20 players on the roster. I can barely keep up now in the new NIL era.
Fair.
you would like to be a Syracuse Sports Insider, we would love for you to join our growing community of some of the more passionate Syracuse sports fans out there. When news like this happens, you get, if we have that breaking news, you get it first, instant analysis, instant information, answering your questions. Like this all happened within a 2-hour period. News breaks, texts come in, your comments highlighted exclusively, by the way, on this podcast. We do not take reaction from social media or anywhere else. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders get an exclusive path to get their voice heard here on live editions of Syracuse Sports and the Syracuse Sports Podcast, our post-game shows, and so much more. It's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider, which gives you direct text message access to me anytime. You want to talk SU Sports? Maybe you've got a news tip or two you want to share. Chris, some texts were coming in this morning. Well, what's going on? Someone's in the portal, and you kind of see things build up to the point where it's like, holy crap, it's Trebor Pena, right? So please join us today. We would love for you to be a part of our Syracuse Sports Insider community. All right, well, we will continue to track this and update any developments here. There's some schools, Miami notably, that have emerged as maybe a favorite to land Trebor Pena. And Chris, as we mentioned, the portal opens tomorrow. We'll see if there's any more Syracuse players in it. We also know that Michael Johnson Jr., who was the primary backup a year ago and lost out in the quarterback competition in this spring, is in the portal. We'll keep you updated on all that. The NFL draft approaches soon, and get Syracuse players doing workouts and doing visits, and the speculation about where they're going to go. We'll be certainly discussing that on the pod, on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line, and of course on syracuse.com as well. All right. Any closing thoughts before we exit stage left here and see what other curveballs the transfer portal wants to throw at us, Chris?
I think we covered it, but we'll see. We'll see people Thursday.
Our live pod on Thursday, right? Yes, sir. Probably. Chris and I have been popping on live on Thursdays, just talking about the latest headlines, news, and things you're discussing as Syracuse sports fans on the live Syracuse Sports Pod. So we'll be looking to do that on Thursday as well. Keep you updated on that. But for now, for Chris Carlson, I'm Brent Dax. This has been another live edition of Syracuse Sports. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed, by the way, guys, on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So whenever a live pod like this pops up or the regularly scheduled podcast of Syracuse Sports, you don't miss out, and you can listen and watch on demand when you want.